What happened during those 3 crazy days in the Soviet Union? In just 3 days, the world's largest country crumbled from the inside, and almost no one saw it coming. On August 19, 1991, Soviet citizens woke up to the shocking news that their leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, had vanished. Tanks rolled through Moscow's streets. Phone lines were cut. A mysterious group claimed control. And in the span of 72 hours, the very existence of the Soviet Union was thrown into chaos. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't just a failed coup. It was a desperate gamble by the old guard to freeze time, crush dissent, and preserve their grip on power. So what really happened during those 3 intense days? Who stood up? Who fell? And what triggered the irreversible collapse of one of history's most powerful empires? The answers lie in a whirlwind of fear, bravery, betrayal, and one unforgettable moment broadcast to the world. To understand those 3 chaotic days, we need to rewind. By the summer of 1991, the Soviet Union was on the edge of collapse. Mikhail Gorbachev had introduced reforms, glasnost and perestroika, that were meant to modernize the system. But instead of stabilizing the country, they unleashed political tension, economic confusion, and nationalist uprisings across the republics. Inflation was rising. Shelves were empty. Protests echoed in city squares. The old communist hardliners saw their grip on power slipping, and fast. On top of that, a new treaty was about to be signed that would give even more autonomy to the Soviet republics. For them, it was the final nail in the coffin. Behind the scenes, top military generals, KGB officials, and high-ranking party elites formed a secret alliance, the State Committee on the State of Emergency. They were convinced that unless they acted immediately, the Soviet Union would dissolve in months, maybe weeks. Their plan? Remove Gorbachev, declare a state of emergency, and take control. But in a country built on fear and silence, they were about to discover something unexpected: defiance. What followed was a high-stakes standoff. 3 days where power shifted, loyalties shattered, and the fate of an empire hung by a thread. The Soviet Union in 1991 was a pressure cooker, and every part of society felt it. The economy was in freefall. Factories were shutting down. Food was scarce, and people spent hours in line for basic goods. Workers weren't getting paid. The ruble was collapsing, and corruption infected every layer of bureaucracy. Morale was at an all-time low. Gorbachev's reforms, intended to open up the country and fix the system, instead exposed its flaws. Censorship had loosened, and people were finally speaking their minds. But what they were saying was damning. Criticism of the Communist Party was no longer whispered, it was shouted. Ethnic tensions flared across the republics. Lithuania, Latvia, Georgia, and others wanted out. Moscow's grip was weakening by the day. Inside the halls of power, fear turned into desperation. The conservatives, men who had spent decades in control, saw their world unraveling. They blamed Gorbachev, accusing him of betraying the revolution. Most alarming of all was the looming Union Treaty, just days away from being signed. This agreement would grant sweeping independence to the republics and decentralize Soviet power. For the hardliners, it was nothing short of a death sentence. So they mobilized 8 of the most powerful men in the country. Generals, KGB leaders, and party elites secretly joined forces. Their goal: stop the treaty, oust Gorbachev, and restore control by any means necessary. The operation had to be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. But things had changed. The Soviet people weren't as obedient as they once were. The press wasn't fully controlled. And then there was Boris Yeltsin, a rival with real popular support and no fear of confrontation. The coup leaders had the tanks, the tools, the tactics. But did they still have the power? The balance was about to be tested. Day 1, August 19, 1991. Across the Soviet Union, people woke up to an eerie broadcast. Somber music played. Then came the announcement. Mikhail Gorbachev, the president, was unable to fulfill his duties due to health reasons. In his place, a new authority had taken over, the State Committee on the State of Emergency. What the public didn't know was that Gorbachev wasn't sick. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own summer home in Crimea. The coup was underway. Tanks rolled into Moscow. Armored vehicles parked in Red Square. KGB officers secured key communication centers. Newspapers were censored and independent media silenced. The new regime declared martial law. It was supposed to be a clean takeover, fast, controlled, and without resistance. But the coup plotters underestimated one thing: the people had changed. The fear that once kept the Soviet Union in check had eroded. That same morning, Boris Yeltsin, the recently elected president of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, emerged as the face of resistance. From the Russian White House, he denounced the coup and declared it illegal. In a bold act of defiance, he stood atop a tank and addressed the nation. The image spread like wildfire, and it became a symbol of hope. Crowds gathered, forming barricades around the building. Citizens brought food, supplies, even their children. They were ready to defend democracy. Day 2, August 20th. The atmosphere in Moscow was electric. Thousands remained camped outside the Russian White House, awaiting a possible attack. Rumors swirled that tanks were moving in to storm the building. Inside, Yeltsin and his allies coordinated with loyal military units and used underground channels to issue decrees and rally the public. Remarkably, many military officers began to defect. Entire divisions refused to follow orders. Some wept as civilians placed flowers in their gun barrels. Back in Crimea, Gorbachev was isolated, his communications cut, but he refused to endorse the coup, a stance that further weakened the committee's legitimacy. International leaders condemned the takeover. US President George H.W. Bush and other Western allies voiced support for Yeltsin and democratic reform. The Soviet public watched with cautious hope. The silence of fear had been broken. That night, tensions peaked. Tanks approached the Russian White House under cover of darkness. Protesters formed human chains. Some dug trenches, prepared for the worst. Then suddenly the tanks stopped. No shots were fired. No soldiers advanced. In that moment of stillness, something profound happened. The people realized the coup was cracking from within. Day 3, August 21st. The dominoes fell quickly. Elite military units, including airborne divisions, declared loyalty to Yeltsin. The streets filled with protesters celebrating, chanting, waving flags. Inside the Kremlin, chaos reigned. The coup leaders, once powerful men feared across the country, were now paralyzed by indecision. Some argued for escalation. Others begged to negotiate. Ultimately, they did nothing. One by one, they resigned, fled, or were arrested. By midday, the coup was effectively over. The tanks withdrew. Gorbachev was freed and flown back to Moscow, where he addressed the nation, but the damage was done. His authority was shattered. The Communist Party was exposed as weak and divided. Yeltsin, once seen as a fringe reformer, now stood as the nation's unshakable leader. In just 72 hours, the world had changed. The failed coup didn't just expose the fragility of the Soviet system, it accelerated its demise. Within weeks, the Baltic states declared independence. The central authority collapsed. On December 25, 1991, the Soviet Union officially ceased to exist. Those 3 days weren't just a turning point. They were a warning, a lesson, and a revolution. In a country built on control, it was courage, unity, and truth that won the battle. The most defining moment of those 3 days came not from a battlefield or a boardroom, but from a single act of defiance seen around the world. On August 19th, Boris Yeltsin, fully aware the coup was in motion, walked out of the besieged Russian White House. The streets were lined with tanks and soldiers under orders to maintain control. The air was heavy with uncertainty. Then, Yeltsin did the unthinkable. He climbed atop one of the tanks. With a megaphone in hand, standing on the symbol of the state's power, he addressed the crowd. That image, Yeltsin towering above the iron machine, would define the collapse of the Soviet regime. It wasn't just a bold move. It was a declaration. The fear that had governed millions for decades was no longer absolute. His speech was brief but charged with electricity. He urged the military to disobey illegal commands. He called on citizens to resist peacefully. He warned the coup plotters that history would remember them as traitors. The moment was caught on film and broadcast globally. Overnight, Yeltsin became a symbol of freedom, and the coup began to collapse from within. Officers refused orders. Some wept as citizens cheered. The tide had turned, not by force, but by the moral power of one act of courage. Inside the coup leadership, panic took hold. Their grip on power slipped. They had underestimated not just Yeltsin, but the people themselves. And as the crowd around the White House grew, it became clear. The Soviet Union would never be the same. This wasn't just a speech. It was a seismic shift in the story of authoritarianism. A moment when fear fell and the future broke through. In just 3 days, an empire unraveled. Not through war or invasion, but through fear, defiance, and a single irreversible shift in public will. The August coup of 1991 was supposed to be the hardliners' final grasp at control. Instead, it exposed how little control they had left. The Soviet Union, once seen as a superpower capable of crushing dissent, was brought to its knees by citizen resistance and its own internal disintegration. The coup failed, but its failure wasn't just a political misstep. It shattered the illusion of stability. It revealed a crumbling foundation beneath a powerful facade. Gorbachev returned to power, but he was now a figurehead without real authority. Boris Yeltsin, through sheer defiance and public support, emerged as the dominant force. A man who didn't just stand against the coup, but stood for a different future. In the months that followed, the dominoes fell fast. One by one, the Soviet republics declared independence. The Communist Party was banned in Russia. By December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned as president of a country that no longer existed. The Soviet flag, once feared and flown across half the world, was lowered for the last time. Those 3 days didn't just end an era, they redefined it. The Cold War closed and a new global order began. The Iron Curtain was pulled back not with weapons, but with willpower. And it all started with a broadcast, a barricade, and one man standing tall on a tank. What do you think would have happened if the coup had succeeded? Would the Soviet Union still exist today? Or was its collapse inevitable no matter what? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how you see this pivotal moment in history. And if this video gave you a deeper understanding of those 3 unforgettable days, don't forget to give it a like and share it with someone who loves history. Your support helps us bring more untold stories from around the world right to your screen. Want more moments that change the world? And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive into history's most dramatic chapters. Thanks for watching and stay curious. This is History Replay, this day.